I'm Rebecca, and I'm from Papua New Guinea. So our Bible reading is taken from John chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. 1 to 11, sorry. So John 12, 1 to 11. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she would save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priest made plans to kill Lazarus as well, for on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. This is the word of the Lord.
Well, today it's the fourth and the last in our little series where we have thought about Jesus and looked at Jesus through the eyes of some of his closest friends. And we saved the best friend for last, this one about Mary. Now, it's funny because Jason listened to my sermon twice already and he still thinks it's a sermon about Martha. But that's okay, Jason. And at the centre of this story, actually, there is a beautiful thing. There is perfume. And I wonder if anyone has perfume in their handbag or wherever, whether you might just pull it out and do one tiny squirt in the air, because I think that'd really set the scene for us. Does anyone have something? Yeah, just do a little squirt up in the air and the fan will bring that round. Okay. There we go. Can you smell something? And now there are no prizes, but I wonder too whether we might like to try and remember some of the most famous and popular perfumes that are for sale in our world today. Does anyone want to call out the name of a perfume or a manufacturer of perfumes? Chanel, yes, the famous Chanel No. 5, that's right. Yeah, Brut 33 doesn't really count. Calvin Klein, yes. Dior. Yeah. Come on, any other ones out there that you know? Oh, very fancy, yep. That's actually not even on my list here, but that's a good one. Giorgio Armani? Estee Lauder. Oh, yeah. Lauder. Okay, I'll get it right. Don't worry, I live in Dapto, so anything I see. There's one called Flower Bomb that's quite famous, apparently. Black Opium, have you heard of that one? Aventus. Yeah, I might stop now while I'm behind. So these perfumes, the most popular perfume that I could find is called Baccarat Rouge 540. And just looking at Google searches and TikTok views and Instagram hashtags, that one has come out on top right at the moment. And I figured out how much it would cost to buy you know, that sort of 350 mils of this perfume, and it works out to be about 4,000 Australian dollars, right? So if anyone wants to buy Anna a Christmas present, there you go. That might be a men's one, I'm not sure. Anyway, I think by worldwide standards, that's still a lot of what a person would earn in a year. I mean, we in Australia are very wealthy, but by world standards, that's very expensive, isn't it? Well, let's have a look at the Bible then, and let's get ourselves in a Mary frame of mind. Now, the Mary we are talking about is not Mary, Jesus' mum. This Mary lives in a place called Bethany, just out of Jerusalem, and she lives with her sister Martha. Good work, Jason. Martha. And Martha is famous for being distracted about the housework when Jesus came to visit. And I think it's a bit tough 2,000 years later that people are still talking about that. We should be kind to Martha. So Mary just wanted to sit with Jesus and hang out with him. Martha wanted a bit more help in the kitchen, you see. That was that story. But Jesus has come again. Mary and Martha also had a brother whose name was Lazarus. And Lazarus, in fact, was the most famous member of this household. And you would be famous too if what happened to Lazarus happened to you. Because Lazarus got sick and Lazarus died. And they had a funeral service for Lazarus. And then some days later, Jesus came along and called him out of the grave, right? And brought him back to life and dusted him off. And so this was huge news. This was a public event of resurrection. And so Lazarus, he's the one that had the Facebook friends and the Instagram followers, or whatever they did back then. He was the famous one. And if you put Lazarus and Jesus together, then you've got two very famous individuals in the same place. You're going to draw a crowd. And in fact, a crowd is drawn. And there is a crowd around the edges of our story today. Really, it should have been Mary who was famous rather than Lazarus. But when you think about it, what did Lazarus contribute to his story? Right? He just stopped breathing. That's all he had to do. Okay? He didn't do very much to be famous. Whereas Mary, she did all the hard work, right? She sent the word to Jesus, "Come, my brother's really sick, come quickly." And it was she who watched for Jesus even as her brother died, even beyond that moment. She who brought Jesus in, who shooed away the crowd and said, "Listen, let Jesus do his thing." And she is the one who had the faith upon which Jesus acted. Lazarus did very little. Martha worked hard and was a great cook. But Mary inspires faith and hope among us today. Now let's have a little think about the time frame. Tick, 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 right? 6 days before the Passover celebration. This is 6 days before the main event where Jesus goes to the cross. Right? Jesus has only days left. The Passover, a Jewish feast where a lamb is eaten. We Australians like our lamb roast. And the Jewish people here actually had a special lamb roast to remember something important that God did back in the time of Moses when God saved his people. And Jesus even called himself the Lamb, the one who lays his life down for the people. And this is another way of understanding the cross. So the tension is sky high. And actually, there is tension, there is friction that is happening here because Jesus is both popular and he is hated. Jesus has helped many, many people, and Jesus has shown up many, many hypocrites. He is loved and hated. He has polarised the community. He loved them, and yet some of them wanted him gone. But I think what this makes this moment special is one more factor. It is that this was a private event, a personal, relational event in this home, there was a different feel. Jesus was among his friends, close friends. This is relaxed, it is informal, we are joking, we are spending time together. It is, in fact, a thank you meal for Jesus, a dinner held in his honour. And as we look back in retrospect, this is the closest thing that Jesus got to a farewell party with his friends, a goodbye party. Maybe you could say the Lord's Supper, but that was a very formal thing. Everyone had speeches, but this was friends. I can imagine people playing jokes on Lazarus, right? Sneaking up and pinching him to make sure he was still alive. I can imagine spontaneous thank you speeches where people who aren't used to public speaking want to say thank you and their throats get all shaky and tears come into their eyes. Thank you, Jesus, that my brother is still alive. This wasn't a moment where people were tight. This is a moment where the food would have been everywhere. That sort of dinner I like going to. And the wine is there and everyone's going to have a special time and show their laughter and their jokes, their relief and their gratitude. The evening was almost perfect. From verse 2, a dinner was prepared in Jesus' honour. Martha served, and Lazarus was among those who ate with him. Then Mary took a 12-ounce jar of expensive perfume made from essence of nard, and she anointed Jesus' feet with it, wiping his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance. We needed a bit more perfume because I can only just smell that perfume that swirled around. But let's not rush this moment. This is what you came to hear about, apart from Alora's fantastic moment. But this is the special moment in the Bible today. What does it mean? How do we understand this moment? It was a moment of generosity, right? Very generous. What expensive perfume. What a beautiful act. Clearly, Mary wants to show her love and devotion for Jesus. But maybe there's something more. In the Bible, sometimes when someone very special comes along, they do a thing called anointing, where we put a bit of, well, we did it today actually with water, right? Or other times with oil, where we set someone apart for a special reason. Today, we set Alora apart to be a follower of Jesus. Now, that's extremely special. Sometimes we might set someone apart to be a minister or to be a king. And at those times, we often use something, water, oil, perfume, to anoint that person. Maybe they're recognising that Jesus is the king. Anointing someone's feet is a bit unusual though, isn't it? Would you have liked us to take your shoe off and splash water on your toes as you came in today, or spray some perfume on your toes? Maybe you would. It's okay. I won't judge you. But this is unusual, and Jesus had just recently taught his followers, his disciples, to actually wash one another's feet. And this was a way of Jesus describing how he washed their sin away, but it was also a way of describing how he was there to serve them and how we believers, are to serve one another. And I think that is clearly on view here, a lowly, humble heart. But then Mary takes it even further, doesn't she? She takes her long hair and she wipes Jesus' feet. She wipes his feet with her hair. Now, there was another time in the Bible when a lady wiped Jesus' feet with her hair. And Mary, being a close friend of Jesus, would have known this, I expect. And that was a very sinful woman who came up behind Jesus and she cried and she was sorry about her sins, and her tears fell on Jesus' feet. And she came down to his feet and she too wiped his feet with her hair. And Jesus didn't send her away. Jesus accepted this sinful woman and he forgave her. And I think that there is a bit of that in what Mary is doing here. She doesn't shy away from identifying with the sinful woman, but she just makes this act even more beautiful by doing it with perfume instead of doing it with tears. Clearly here is an act of love, of devotion, of dependence, of humility and submission. Beautiful, beautiful act. Have you ever watched a documentary where you think the documentary went just too far? You know, where you just became too analytical, right? And we tried to explain everything when really we should just stand back and go, isn't that amazing? Yeah? I think sometimes we can try too hard to understand Jesus in these moments. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We should try to understand. But maybe sometimes it's okay for us just to be caught up in wonder and just to think, what a beautiful moment. How special is that? This thing that just happened between Mary and Jesus. And we're told there in the Bible that the whole house was filled with the fragrance, that everyone who was there was part of this sweet exchange. And I would like to suggest that we can adore Jesus. We can cherish Jesus. We can worship Jesus. And Matthew's Gospel and Mark's Gospel, when they tell this story, they say, she has done a beautiful thing for me. Let's not rush past that, eh? And I'm so grateful that someone said thank you to Jesus. You know, it was pretty brutal those last few days of Jesus' life, but here he is among friends, experiencing love and devotion and kindness. Well, this is how the Lady Mary approached Jesus, and this is what she offered. But how was it received? Well, someone gets in the way. Judas. He's like, excuse me, everybody. No. Something's not right here. It says here in verse 4, but Judas Iscariot, the disciple who would soon betray him, said, that perfume was worth a year's wages. It should have been sold and the money given to the poor. Not that he cared for the poor, he was a thief. And since he was in charge of the disciples' money, he often stole some for himself. So it's a bit of a side story, a bit of a side quest, but this Judas character actually has a poor reputation, and he wants to put a stop to this moment. And he wants to describe what just happened, not as a beautiful moment, but as a wasteful act. Something precious, something worth money, was wasted on mere sentiment, feelings, emotions. But Jesus says, leave her alone. So let's now think about how Jesus receives it. Leave her alone, says Jesus. She did this in preparation for my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. So Jesus isn't saying don't help poor people. He actually loves poor people. But this is a very special moment which was about Jesus. He doesn't diminish the gift. Jesus receives it and he heightens it and he grants it a role in his divine plans. He brings this beautiful response together into his life's work and purpose. This is all about the ultimate moment where he lays his life down for us. It's in preparation for his burial, for his resurrection. Now, I love this moment. And if I stopped there, I would be satisfied with my sermon and I would sit down a happy Pastor Pete. All right? But there's one more thing I want to share with you that I think it's like the cherry on top of the cake. Because a little while later, let me just say, the ladies often understood Jesus straight away, and the blokes were often a little bit silly and they took longer to understand right? The disciples often did the silly things, and the ladies in the gospel often got it right straight away. So I enjoy that irony that we find in the gospels. But later on, the men catch up and the men figure it out. And one of these guys writes this thing down in 2 Corinthians and verse 2. Now he uses us to spread the knowledge of Christ everywhere. So this is writing in the early church after Jesus' resurrection. And they're saying that God uses believers to spread the knowledge of Christ everywhere like a sweet perfume. Our lives, he says, are a Christ-like fragrance rising up to God. Isn't that incredible? This moment with Jesus is lived by the believers. You are perfume. Believe it or not, you're perfume, right? You smell great to God. Your life is a fragrance offered to God. As you spread the knowledge of his King, you inevitably spread the fragrance of the knowledge of Christ. And like Mary's gift, this is something that we bring and give freely. We give to God our most precious and valued possessions, our personality, our time, our relationships. And like Mary, it is done in a beautiful, dependent, faith-filled way. This is a life of sacrifice, a response to Jesus' love. And we get the same idea in Romans chapter 12. And so, dear brothers, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. What an amazing concept. The perfume fills the house. But the perfume either delights or offends, just like Jesus divided. And again, going back to 2 Corinthians 2, but this fragrance is perceived differently by those who are being saved and by those who are perishing. To those who are perishing, we are a dreadful smell of death and doom. But to those who are being saved, we are a life-giving perfume. Friends, Mary lived it. She is our exemplar. She lived a worshipful life, knowing and adoring Jesus, living in his presence, this life of love that overflowed beautifully and inevitably to all around her. And actually, that's God's call on you and me as well. We get to be that fragrance. As we go to work, to university, to wherever this week, we take Jesus with us and we spread his fragrance. So be of good courage, be filled with faith and trust him, and he is with you every step of the way. And wear some perfume.